Welcome to the NABS podcast. NABS is the support organisation for those working in advertising, marketing and media. I'm your host, Louise Scody. Each week I'll be chatting with someone from our industry to find out how they support themselves and those around them through challenging times as well as the day-to-day. And it's all to help you support your own mental wellness. I can't wait to start chatting. Rachel Peace is the MD of Hearts and Science. Rachel manages all aspects of the day-to-day agency operations, delivering the best possible experience for Hearts people and their clients, and the successes speak for themselves. Hearts was awarded the fastest growing agency in 2024. Over the course of her 20-year career, Rachel has played an integral part in award wins for the likes of Media Week, Campaign Media, Marketing Week and Gold IPA Effectiveness. She's also served across a number of awards juries, including Festival of Media, Media Week Awards, and the Campaign Media Awards. Rachel prides herself on fostering workplaces that are welcoming and inclusive. She champions building diverse team cultures to bring fresh perspectives and new ways of thinking to the team and the industry at large. Rachel is a proud advocate for neurodiversity and dyslexia, speaking openly about the many advantages it brings to leaders, such as problem solving, attention to detail, and heightened empathy. Welcome to the NABS podcast, Rachel. How are you doing today?
Well, all the better. What an amazing introduction. Thank you so much, Louise.
So we've got loads to chat about. And I'll just say I'm really struck by the dyslexia leading to problem solving, attention to detail, and heightened empathy, because that's my daughter. And she's got all of those qualities. So just to tell us a bit more about that.
Well, it's a great question to talk about neurodiversity and dyslexia. It's definitely something that I felt more comfortable as I've grown older, alongside many things. In my family, you are unusual if you are not dyslexic. I come from a family of dyslexics. And it's never been something that we've been allowed to use as an excuse of holding us back, or it's very much kind of looking at the positives of what that means. But it is something that I've had to kind of really learn about what the benefits of it are. And, as you mentioned, things like problem solving and bigger picture thinking are things that I find that come a bit easier to me. They can be massively lent into in our career that we work in terms of media and marketing. But it also means about watching out for the things that you need to spend a bit more time on.
Yeah.
And where the things that are actually draining you is really important to understand alongside the balance of that.
Yeah, I guess it gives you a heightened self-awareness, and then it's about knowing where you can reach out for support as well.
Yeah. And I think, particularly I describe myself as delightfully dyslexic. That's where I feel incredibly comfortable at now. But one of the big kind of breakthrough moments for me was particularly a couple of years ago of kind of letting go of my ego around my dyslexia. I think I'd spent a very long time masking, and particularly for women, it's a big thing, by the way. We try and kind of keep up with the Joneses on a lot of bases. And I think I'd done a lot of that. And I think that had definitely contributed to maybe some poor mental health over my career and over my lifetime. But interestingly for me, what I would say is as soon as I let go of that, and I'm very open about it, but that means I let people in and help me, and I'm very open and honest about asking for help first. It was such a breakthrough for me because it just meant it's the authenticity piece that you can really do. There are elements that I bring that people really struggle with, but at the same time, just asking somebody to spell check something or just read through a document or just helping me with an interpretation of something, nobody's ever that bothered about it. And it's a huge benefit for me now.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking of ego, actually, if you're asking someone else for help, you are buttering them up because they're like, "Ooh, I'm good enough to spell check. Thank you very much, Rachel MD. Yes, I shall check your work."
Yeah. There is that thing. We don't really have many egos at Hearts, which is one of the reasons I absolutely love my job. But the second part of it is absolutely fine. I am very comfortable about asking anybody at Hearts to kind of just double check a piece of work that I've written, or double check an interpretation of a document I've written or kind of read, just to make sure that I've fully understood it, because sometimes my neurodiversity can sometimes get away from me.
Absolutely. Know where you want some help and know how to ask for it, which is something that we're going to talk about when we look at your mental wellness challenge. So always have a big conversation about a mental wellness challenge that you've had to face on this podcast. So tell us about yours.
It was a great question that you asked, Louise, in terms of thinking about what was my biggest kind of mental wellness challenge. And the one that really kind of a pivotal moment in my life was I reached burnout in my early 30s, which meant that I had the best part of 2 months off work. And for me, there's lots of things that stand out about that moment. I do remember it being very scary. I do remember it being very challenging. I do remember as well it having a real it felt very different from what else was going on in my life. Like, as in, it was very much a work related burnout scenario, but that was very different from what was going on in my personal life. There was lots of brilliance that was happening around me. I met and moved in with my husband. My friends and family were all in fantastic places and doing brilliant things. I was doing these amazing adventures and travel. I'd done a lot of travel over that kind of run up period. And also my health and fitness. I was in a really great place. So it felt like my life was if you look from the outside, was in a really brilliant place. But I think what had really happened was over the course of, say, the best part of 6 months, I've been on the precipice of a burnout. I'd never just kind of stepped over. But what I do remember, and it is hazy in the run up to actually me taking time out from work, was I went down pretty fast. It felt like I went from feeling okay to feeling very much out of control. And that is very scary. Very scary indeed.
I've got so many questions about this. So my first one, I think, is what do you think were the factors that led to the burnout? Because it's easy just to say overwork, and there are loads of people in the industry working too many hours, and that is not a good thing. Is it just the hours, or was there other stuff on top?
It's such a brilliant build in terms of really looking under the skin of what it was, because you're right. I think we work in a very busy and cluttered and highly energized industry, and you've got to really understand what it is. I can't speak for anybody else. I can only speak for me. And I know we're going to talk about it a little bit later on in terms of the relation to fast forward, but
Yeah.
actually I've done a combination of pitches back to back.
Right.
So I've done 4 big pitches back to back. And I hadn't taken any time to really reflect on that. And I was just going at a very high pace all the way right through. And I was particularly at a time in my career where I was wanting to do everything across every pitch. And again, probably the ego and competitive nature that was existing in me was a big part of that. I would also say that I wasn't, and again, going back to the first question, I wasn't as open as I am about my dyslexia now. So again, I was doing some masking from situations that were happening with that. I know from my dyslexia, when I'm tired and I'm stressed, the only way I can put it is I feel more dyslexic.
Right.
Things take longer for me to understand, things take longer for me to read. Generally, things like if I'm reading documents and I'm tired, words jump around more.
Yeah.
I wasn't talking openly about that, but I was trying to manage that through. And I think I was trying to do this piece where I was going, I can do everything
Mm.
and just keep on running at it, and it will magically come to some sort of nirvana. And it didn't end up in the nirvana.
So where did it end up? 'Cause you said once you were there, you were there. It happened really quickly.
Yeah, it didn't end up in a great place. It ended up in a great place subsequently, but initially. Yeah. So again, as I say, I can't remember a lot of what happened in the 10 days from feeling okay to ending up in a doctor's surgery. But I can tell you what other people have told me. I had, as I mentioned, I just moved in with my boyfriend. I became quite erratic and manic. So he was living with that, and that was having some really highs and lows as part of that. He then became incredibly worried about me. I was not sleeping very well or sleeping a lot at the weekend. So I was going from very high, kind of mixed extremes. And so he'd phoned my parents. So you can imagine he must have been in a very worried state to phone my parents because he didn't know my parents at the time very well, to explain this. And I then ended up on a phone call with my mum, who is an ex-social worker, so is very good at dealing with crisis situations. Again, reflecting back on it, I can't believe how rude and dismissive I was of her when she was on the phone to me. And we came to an agreement where I basically said I would go to the doctors. She got me to agree to go to the doctors, but only if I could go to a client meeting that I felt was incredibly important first. And so I made my mother travel down from the Lake District to basically come to our house, pick me up, take me to the client meeting. She sat in reception and then she took me to the doctors. And unsurprisingly, the doctors signed me off pretty quick. And then I slept for 2 days. That's one.
Right.
I remember that 10-day period. So I think it's quite scary for everybody involved.
You must have been exhibiting signs of this at work.
Yeah, I can't believe I wasn't.
And I can't believe no one at
Um,
work picked up on it. Unless they did and you just haven't said that yet.
I think people were aware I was under stress and was really struggling. I don't know whether in the environment I was working in, and that's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about having or creating environments, particularly as a leadership individual running a leadership team, about creating open environments, was aware of the struggles that I was going through. And I think, again, I had a very good way of masking, of saying, no, everything's fine, everything's fine. But I think you probably would have been able to look at me and go, she's not in the best place.
So we are going to come on to how managers can support people who've been through burnout. But it's really important to think about how you support someone who looks as though they're going through burnout. I mean, ideally we do preventative work, right? But you were not blessed with that particular experience. So if
Yes,
you had someone
I
on your
wasn't.
team now who was going through burnout, you would spot it and what would you do?
My first thing is to say is you just need to start a conversation with somebody.
Mm,
And I think your job in that, or your role in that, is you're not there to fix anybody. You're not there to sort out their entire situation. You're not there to kind of pull them back together or sort out their world of problems. But you can just say, I want to ask you how you're doing. And I'd really like you to answer that honestly and open up a very safe space for somebody to start a conversation. The amount of times that you can just, by sitting and watching somebody, even for 10 minutes, work out that they're maybe not in the best headspace is amazing. And then just taking a quiet moment with them to say, I just want to give you a safe space to tell me how you are. It's so, one, so empathetic to that individual, but two, it relieves a lot of the pressure.
absolutely. You know, we have our NABS Managers Mindsets training program. And what you've said about you're not expected to fix, you're not the therapist, but you are the person who can open up the conversation. And that is, of course, skill that we teach. And then we say, refer to NABS because we can hold that deeper conversation and signpost where necessary.
Yeah, and I NABS has such a wealth of toolkits and training and support services, as well as quite a lot of other things that exist in the industry now, like individual companies. There are a wealth out there. Probably didn't exist as much when I was going through my burnout period. But what I would say is it just needs one person to say, I just want to ask you how you are in this moment and give you a safe space to really just tell me how you are. And it's
Yeah.
amazing how many people then just kind of go, I need to tell you I'm not in a good space.
Yeah. So I'm really interested in your road to recovery because looking at you now, you're in an absolutely brilliant place. And you're obviously leading with the knowledge of someone who's been through it and doesn't want your people to go through it, which is a really positive way to use what you've been through. So you get signed off, you spend 2 days sleeping. How long are you off work for? And then when you come back, was there any sense of looking after you, making sure you had a staggered return, ongoing support?
Yeah. So I slept for 2 days. I then got shipped off back to the Lake District for a week. That was
There could
really
be
good.
worse places to recover in.
It could be worse place. Ironically, the place that I tried to run away from for most of my teenage life. Go and recuperate was amazing. I did what my family call baby birding, which is actually, ironically, my nickname from the family now, but I just sat on the sofa and slept and got woken up to be fed and then went back to sleep. And that's what I did. I was really good at that. I then came back and obviously I'd been speaking about it a lot with my boyfriend in terms of what we were going to do and various other things. I was very lucky that I had an incredibly supportive doctor who's really helping me through it. Because again, I think after your initial sign off, that feels like a moment of relief. It feels like
Yeah.
somebody's taken away the decisions that you have to take away, which is what you actually want to happen ultimately. But then the anxiety then brings up about what people are going to think of me and how this is going to work and how am I going to go back into that environment, and I don't feel ready. And you really feel like you've really gone to your core soul, and you feel very exposed and very vulnerable. I did have a staggered return back to work, which lasted the best part of 2 weeks. And then it was kind of just expected to be back at work. Now, I would like to say this is not obviously in the organisation that I now work for, and various other things. It felt like you had your staggered return and then you kind of came back. I remember having a conversation with my husband, and he was very much about the fact of kind of going, and my family was saying that it had been a very scary experience for everybody to watch me go through that. And that I really needed to look at what the toolkit was going to be for me longer term. Because the fact of the matter is, unless you are really taking some learnings from that experience and some real clear understanding about what needs to change moving forward, either you need to change it or alternatively, you need to put a toolkit in place that helps you change your situation. I was going to end up back in the same situation pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I always find that how you frame things is really important for the individual. And my doctor basically said, well, you like running and exercise and things like that. And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, you need to think of this as rehab. You need to think of it as you've got an injury and you need to fix it. But you would put some proper understanding and training, and you would go and see a kind of a doctor, you go and see a physio, and you need to think about what the kind of toolkit of that is. That helped me rephrase quite a lot of things. And then I then had to try lots of different solutions. And that was actually sometimes as hard as the initial burnout moment. I think I mentioned to you, I got recommended to go to group therapy
You
and do
did. And you
cognitive
said
behavior.
wasn't the thing for you.
No, it set me back quite a few weeks. I remember I had a bit of a moment in the group therapy session, and then I had a bit of a moment outside of the hospital. Again, it was like the combination of the setup and then also where it was, and it just felt incredibly overwhelming. But so I kind of learned that maybe group therapy wasn't for me, but cognitive behavioral therapy could be quite interesting. And then I realized, well, maybe therapy is what I want to go and explore. And so we actually interviewed a load of therapists, and I chose one, and I still use her to this day. Kind of
Amazing.
when I'm feeling moments of, I kind of do like 6-week blocks when I'm having maybe moments where I'm not feeling great. And it just helps me just make sure that I'm kind of really looking to myself and focusing on the things that I need to do. But she's been a main part of my life, for 10 plus years now. And that's also got a lot of comfort in it. Like, she's got my history and she knows what I am and she knows about my setup, and that's really important. But what I really love about it is it was a very different type of setup from the original one. So what I would recommend is that the toolkit that you build after these scenarios has to be as unique as you are as an individual.
Yeah.
And people will give you a lot of advice, and people will give you a lot of either tools that they've used or tools that they've heard about or opportunities. All of those are amazing. They are amazing. And I think the open conversation we particularly have around things like burnout now is really important. What I would say is, like any piece of feedback, it's a gift, but it is a gift that you can choose to keep or not.
You can return it and exchange it for something else.
Absolutely. And anybody who knows me knows that I return nearly half my Christmas presents. Change half my Christmas. But I think
Just get Rachel a gift voucher. It's easier.
completely, I'm a gift girl all the way. But it is really interesting as well. And I think one of the things that I definitely learned early on in my recovery is I do have a very big people pleaser need. So when somebody was giving
Mm,
me a piece of advice, I was like, oh, that's what I've got to do. And then I was really kind of riling against it and going, maybe this is not for me, but I just need to work through it.
mm.
And if I work through it, it will get better rather than going, or it's just not for you.
But that's really interesting that this gave you an opportunity to work through your people pleasing nature because undoubtedly the people pleasing part of you helped to contribute towards the burnout in the first place.
Yeah, it definitely had a huge. I loved a comment that you made a while ago when you were talking about what you say yes to and what you say no to. So what you're
Yeah,
saying yes to means that you're saying no to something else. I loved that comment. It's really stuck with me, and that was a big part of it. I just said yes to a lot of things, which meant that I was saying no to a lot of things for myself. And that had to fundamentally change. Now, I still have that people pleaser need in me, but it definitely is less than it ever was before because I know that it comes with a payoff, and the payoff is not always great,
exactly.
particularly for my mental health.
Yeah. So that sense of if you're saying yes to something, you're turning down something that might be better for you. And conversely, if you're saying no to something that you know is not going to suit you, it will open up a yes for something that's going to support you better. On the subject of therapy, this is a shout out for NABS therapy referral service. And to say that we can help you to access lots of different types of therapists. And Rachel, what you said about interviewing therapists, genius, because you need to find the right chemistry and you need to find the right therapist. And any therapist worth their salt will know that. And they won't mind having a conversation with you first to establish whether you've got that chemistry and you've got that understanding.
You look at it and you go, you wouldn't go into a long-term relationship or a relationship with somebody without having some sort of introduction or chemistry there. And therapy is a very vulnerable space that you're putting yourself in. And in order to get the most out of it, you need to feel comfortable enough to be as vulnerable as you can be. And I'm very lucky that I found a therapist that works with me on that. And as I say, I don't do long term therapy. I now do it in kind of blocks. So I have a set of, I think we were talking about things that I do on an ongoing basis. I have a set of flags that I have, as I call them, like red flags that I've kind of built up over things where I know that I'm maybe not looking after myself as well. And
Mm.
if I have more than 3 in a month, I put myself a bit on a watch list. If it
Right.
then goes
Okay.
into the following month, I then book myself a set of therapy sessions with my therapist.
That is
Um,
really interesting. Are you happy to share any of the flags?
yeah, of course. Yeah. My husband's tried to add things to the list, by the way, like things like taking out the
Husbands will
bin,
do that.
not contributing as much to the housework. So I have exercise and health is a big thing that I use to kind of make sure that my mental health is in a good space, and my physical health. So if I start cancelling gym sessions, if I could cancel more than 2 gym sessions in a week, that's a flag for me. Also, if I'm not replying to texts from friends and family, because it means that I'm going quite inward within myself. If I haven't had what I considered a day off, a really solid day off of just recharging, just for me, and that might be me going out and doing things. I love art galleries and seeing friends and various, but it's got to be a real kind of mental day off. If I haven't had one of those within a 3-week period, that's another red flag for me. And I build quite a lot of these in, if that makes sense. And it's also about things like if I am really starting to have trouble sleeping,
Yeah. That's a big trigger for
if I
lots of
have
people.
1 or 2 nights of bad sleep, I then do a clean sleep routine for at least a week, see if that resets everything. If not, I then go into kind of emergency measures, as I say. So I don't think they're unique, but I think they are a combination that I have, which I know that if I have a combination of them that are not firing right, I know that probably something is coming my way.
All right, so this is a great piece of advice for everyone, actually. Know what your triggers are, know where your flags are, and if your flags are coming at you in a particular combination, get help. What's one other piece of advice you'd build on that with to encourage other people who are maybe going through burnout at the moment? They can see themselves on the way. What's one thing they need to do?
There's so many. And as I say, it is a gift, so people can either choose to take it or ignore it. I do think if you can find somebody to have a safe conversation with, I'd go and do that. It's probably the first thing. The second thing is go to the NABS website.
Definitely.
It's like amazing toolkit. And just having a conversation with somebody, phoning the helpline if you
Yeah.
can't find that safe person, go and do that would be the one thing to go and do. And then I would also recommend things like, candidly, I take myself out of looking at things. So if
Mm,
you are not feeling in your best place, don't go on social media, don't go on
mm,
LinkedIn,
mm,
don't don't go and watch programs that kind of maybe glamorize a lifestyle that maybe you're looking for or anything like that.
mm,
They all come with their own caveats, and I just don't think that's sometimes a healthy place to be. I think social media and LinkedIn and various other things has got an amazing place in the world, but maybe if you're not feeling the best,
mm.
not the right space.
I would agree with that. I'd say that was across life as well. Look at what you're ingesting and see whether it's supporting you.
Yeah, yeah. I have one of the conversations I have regularly with my husband is how much news we have on in the house or we're
Yeah.
bringing into the space because the world is particularly at the moment, a big, bad, scary place.
Mm,
And if
mm.
you're not feeling great, having a constant stream of news from various different sources, sometimes not helpful.
Do you know what? It's an ongoing conversation with us on the NABS team as well, because we have a 24-hour news cycle. But as humans, we're not designed to absorb news 4 hours. It's not healthy and it's not particularly useful. So you need to work out what you're able to absorb usefully and when the best time for you to do that is. Now, you're on the other side, leading a team, leading a company, having been through burnout. How would you advise that managers can support people who've been through it? We've talked about if you can spot those signs, opening the conversation. But once someone's in recovery, which you rightly say is not a linear process and it can last for years, right? Recovery. How can you support people who are in recovery? I wouldn't even say have recovered from burnout, would you? Because I think there's that element that you always need support with.
Yeah, I think that's probably I think that's a really good way of putting it. I kind of look at my burnout moment as just a seismic shift in my journey,
Yeah.
and it put me on a different path, a path that I now feel probably because I'm far enough away from the initial situation, a path I feel very privileged by. I feel like I've learned a lot through it, both in terms of how I manage myself and how I manage others. Not always perfect on both, by the way. Still a kind of road to go on, but always wanting to kind of learn more. But as you say, the systems are kind of set up to do it in chunks of time, and then people are just expected to be back to inverted commas normal.
Yeah.
So I think managers play an absolutely vital role. One, in terms of spotting burnout before it probably gets to burnout.
Yeah.
I think I definitely witness it, and I'm privileged to witness it every day about how empathetic and compassionate leaders are to their teams and each other. And there's a lot of conversations that I have about, people coming up and saying, I am concerned about so and so and about what they're working on or what they're doing currently at the moment and what relief and support we can offer. So they are watching. So I think just be be vigilant and be mindful and watching for the small changes because it is small things. And we have to remember life is lived in the small moments.
Yeah.
So what I would say is the small changes you can kind of witness in others, but also you should be looking about what small adjustments you can make to somebody as they are starting to come back to maybe a work environment.
Yeah.
Because we have to
And what
remember
would some of
with
those
things
be?
like
Is that personal to the each person or are there some universal tips that you can give?
So the universal tips I would say is there is a very kind of real kind of piece about how you manage people's workloads. I think you being really close to people's workloads to work out how they're managing, I think is really important. And just being really conscious about how you kind of slowly integrate them back into a work environment. You should be giving them things that feel achievable and can get some really good small wins when they're starting to come back, rather than big chunky pieces of work is a real critical one. The second one is like looking at things like adjustable hours, taking time in terms of the week about thinking about how they can adjust their working patterns, I think is really important. Do they need to have, a morning at the office to go and maybe attend therapy, but also do some life admin? If they did that in the morning on a particular day, would that massively help their overall piece? You should be open to those conversations and should feel you can have those conversations with your line managers as well, I think is really important. The other aspect is just keep on asking them how they are today. I
Yeah.
think it's a really big question when you're talking about how are you generally, expecting
Yeah.
people to answer that. But how are you today and taking your cue from that. One of the things that we do at Hearts is that, and again, it maybe comes down to maybe some of my, I always struggle, I still struggle with that question sometimes when people go, how are you? Is I ask people just to rate how they are between 1 and 10 on a constant level. I normally start quite a few meetings that way. It actually gives you a bit of a judgment call about where people generally are, and then when they are on a high, or then maybe when they are struggling.
Yeah.
You also realise the pessimists and the optimists in your team as well.
The
Those that
constant twos and
generally
the constant eights.
yeah, the constant fours and the constant eights and various other things, which is really good. But again, I find that incredibly helpful, and it's a useful practical tool that I use just to judge where people are. And it opens up the conversation without maybe going into the how are you, and people feeling a bit more comfortable with that. So I think there's a big part of that. And then my bigger ask is probably just show up consistently to
Yeah.
that. Don't do it for a week or 2 weeks. You've got to keep there, and you've got to be that constant voice all the way through and checking in with them, because that's what really matters.
Yeah. Completely agree with that. Now, you're doing something really great for the mental wellness of our industry, not just in talking about burnout, but you are the new chair of Fast Forward, which is NABS's legendary pitching course, which is super, super exciting. You've been involved with Fast Forward for a number of years now, and now you're at the helm, which is just brilliant. Why do you love Fast Forward so much? And what are your plans for this year?
Well, I am incredibly honoured to be selected as the chair of Fast Forward. I have been involved with Fast Forward for the best part of 8 years now, and I've done a number of different roles. So I've done a speaker role, I've done a judging role, and I've done a mentor role, and now I'm coming in to be chair. The running joke I have with Frankie, who's the course director, is that I got my NABS Fast Forward EGOT equivalent.
Yeah.
I'm still very, very honoured. But I think the reason that I love it so much and I keep on coming back to it, and I really feel like it's one of the highlights of my year, and it's actually something that keeps on coming back when we speak to speakers and mentors, is that Fast Forward is unique in the industry as a course. What I believe is three things. Firstly, it's a real life pitch scenario. You have a client involved who gives a brief on opening night, and they are really invested in making sure they're bringing the real life experience of pitching to us. So they have a brief, they have a tissue session with you, and then also they are part of the judging panel, which again is what happens in a pitch scenario. The second one is it runs across the entirety of media and marketing. So the brilliance of what you now have is, rather than maybe it just being a pitching course aimed at media or creative, you are working alongside creatives, PR specialists, CRM specialists, media specialists. That's an amazing ability and skill set to understand and work alongside. And what I would say is, probably as we are moving forward in our industry, it's what more pitches are like now. You are seeing integrated pitching teams and models of skill sets coming together. So it's absolutely invaluable. But the bigger thing for me is, I do think versus, again, other pitching courses that exist in this industry, you do get to kind of really live a live pitch scenario over a number of weeks versus maybe a 24-hour or 48-hour period, understand what it's like working in a team, but you're doing it in an incredibly safe space. And it means that what we forget in our industry is that pitching is a skill set. And it's a skill set that actually a lot of people have to learn on the job. They come in and to be a planner, or they come in to be a creative, or they come in to be a strategist. But the pitching element of their job is kind of, you go and learn that skill set by going and doing and being on a pitch. But that comes with quite a bit of pressure, and it comes with quite a lot of expectations when you're working in an individual agency or team. And I think what NABS gives you is it kind of almost demystifies that for people. They get to see how a pitch runs and where their skill set could be. Because again, what we forget is that everybody who thinks they should be on a pitch thinks they should be the person getting up and talking through the creative ideas, or standing in front of the client, or running every meeting. And by the way, there are people that do that. But what I really have enjoyed about watching people on Fast Forward is they've learned that maybe that's not their skill set, but they have a brilliant skill set that exists within a pitch team. So it could be they're fantastic at insight. So they can go away and really understand customers, or they have a brilliant opportunity of kind of really understanding how a media plan kind of comes together and working alongside creative or partnership ideas. And that's what they're bringing to a pitch team. But I think for me, what I love about Fast Forward is you get to see that live, and you get to do that in a really safe environment.
Yeah. And it's so much fun as well. I've been to the pitch night and I've been to the opening nights of a couple of the courses now. And the atmosphere is just electric. And the delegates are just so up for it. And the ideas that they come up with are fantastic.
You can't underrate that. I get so much energy from being part of. I feel a little bit like a fraud, to be quite frank, because I think I get sometimes more out of it than the delegates do. Because you're right, that energy and just seeing people working in that environment is so electrifying and so uplifting, and reminds me why I love being part of this industry and why I love
Yeah.
being part of the team. But you also see the kind of realization for them about what a pitch scenario means, and it demystifies so many expectations they've come in with. And it also means that their anxiety that potentially did exist beforehand disappears, because you're kind of letting them see that there isn't anything to be scared of. It is part of what our industry is. I think I did a rough tally of where I was to with pitches, and I think I've done on average 5 a year over my course of my career. So it is an integral part of what you do as your job working in this industry. Yet it still has a lot of anticipation and nervousness around it that gets created. I think even the word pitch
Yeah.
has some meaning that people really kind of, you can see them kind of really kind of sometimes get very anxious about even the thought of it. And watching people come into that room right at the start and seeing that kind of anxiety go, and seeing them thrive in the same time, is a really joyous thing to be around.
So part of the mental wellness piece around NABS doing fast forward is removing that anxiety around pitching and demystifying, as you say. What's one tip you'd give for managers once pitches are happening in the real world? What's one thing that you can do to help your pitch team with their mental wellness?
First of all, I genuinely believe as managers, you need to model the right behavior. We talk about a lot about how you manage your mental wellness, and you will be coming in with it from learned experiences that you've had before. So versus maybe other people in the team. So, I spend a lot of time, particularly when I'm leading pitches, working out about how I can model the right behavior that I want other people to see. So that's making sure that I am leaving on time regularly, making sure that I'm taking mental health lunchtime breaks. We go and have a walk and talk rather than have a meeting in a room, making sure that we are having fun where we can. So coming together and making parts of it fun, and everybody's learning, and it's being really important. but also me just being quite honest about the moments that I'm struggling and saying that I'm finding this really tough. And I think how you model that authentic piece about, saying that you are struggling with things as a leadership individual in those moments is really important for people. They need to see those things. So I would definitely say modeling the right behavior is a big part of it. The second thing I would also say is I think there is a lot of prep work that you can do with teams before a pitch arrives about how you make sure about how they are kind of looking about how they're going to manage their time over a pitch scenario. I do think, as you say, the great thing about the NABS Fast Forward course is there is a lot of quality that's removed because you are being very open, very transparent, very inclusive about what happens during a pitch process. And what I do think is what happens with people and pitches, particularly if they haven't done it before, there is a lot of what I call anticipation anxiety, as in
Yeah.
they are just nervous of what the unknown is. You trying to break that down beforehand is a big part of what you can do. So I can only talk about what we do at Hearts. We work really hard to talk about how we map out people's times and teams' times across the course of a pitch. We are making sure that we have regular check-ins. We're making sure that we have proper feedback cycles and loops so people can understand about where we are in the process, even if they're not involved in that moment in the process. And we are also just making sure that we are taking time in that moment just to check in with people. Having a meeting about how people are feeling is as equally as important about checking in about where the work is.
How does the advertising community lift you up?
In so many ways, I can't rave about this industry enough. I think for me, it is about the people. I know that's probably an answer that comes back time and time again, but we do over index in an industry. Like my husband's an engineer, you know, their
That's
Christmas
very
parties
different.
is not really, really different, really different, very different energy. But what I would say is this industry over indexes in people that bring energy, that bring empathy, that bring excitement, that bring real ideas. And that's something incredibly unique. You go to any meeting room in any part of this building that I'm sitting in at the moment, or any advertising agency, or any creative or PR, or any marketing agency, you go to any event and you just feel the energy. And I think that's really important. And I think for me, what it reminds me about is that actually I'm part of something bigger and it's not just about the work. I had an old colleague that used to say to me at moments that do get tough, because there are pressured moments, is we're not packing parachutes, Rachel. It's true. We're not saving lives. We're not packing parachutes. I'm not trying to underestimate the pressure that some people are under. And as I say, I took it too far and ended up in a burnout scenario, as we talked about. And that was very real. That was incredibly real. So I'm not saying that we should underestimate how things can damage people's mental health. But what I would say is, you know, it's really important that we remember why we are in this industry and the brilliance that exists in this industry. And for me, Fast Forward is a really good example of that. We have people that come back, like myself, year after year after year. And they don't do it for the status and they don't do it for a bit of a LinkedIn post. They do it because they genuinely want to leave this industry in a better place than what they found it. And I don't think there's many industries that have that. I don't in this day and age. And that's why I am so thankful I answered that ad 20 something years ago.
And I think a lot of people in the industry will be happy that you answered the ad as well. Incredibly, we have reached the last question. It's been such a fascinating interview. What's one thing you've learned about how to support yourself?
So what can I go back and tell 21-year-old Rachel? So many things come to mind. I think actually I mentioned it right at the start is I think the burnout scenario and my recovery from that was a big part of it. Was I'd made it so much about me and my ego to get to that point, and letting go of that so hard was such a pivotal thing that I just get so much more enjoyment and fulfillment out of my job now and my career. I have this piece where I'm incredibly competitive by nature. I come from a family of sports people and we are competitive. Never ask us to play Monopoly. As a family of dyslexics, definitely don't ask us to play Scrabble because that game will never end. But what I would say is that I think I'd really made it all about me for such a long time. And I was really focused on what my positioning was like, what my status was like, what I'd really kind of built this aspect up where I felt like only me could do the best job possible. Only me could do the work that the client had given. I was very struggling with how I delegated to people. It was a really kind of slightly warped sense of self. Burnout made me really relook at that because unless I rechange my thinking around that, I was going to go back into that, as we talked about, building up that toolkit and what you're going to learn not to do. That was a big part for me because it releases a lot of weight. I do have to make big decisions now. As you say, I'm very privileged that I run a team, I run an agency, and my decisions come with weight. And my thinking comes with situations that come out of that. But what I would say is you can only make that decision with the information you have in that moment, and it's made in that moment. And I put a lot of thought into my decisions, but I don't take that weight carrying forward because I'm not carrying it with the sense that my ego and my competitiveness needs to come with it. And I think that's been a huge learning curve for me. And I would definitely recommend it to anybody. It was a big chip off my shoulder. It was a big, had to do a lot of soul searching for it. But I get so much more fulfillment now out of watching others and taking immense pride in what my team do and what my agency do and what the individuals that I get to work with day in, day out do than what my title is or what my status is. It's quite fundamental to how I think now.
Rachel, you've been absolutely delightful. We've learned so much from you today. Drop your ego, let other people in, and everything will be okay. And we're really looking forward to Fast Forward this year. We'll pop a link to everything in the show notes so you know how to find out about Fast Forward and our management training. And in the meantime, Rachel, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for making this a really safe space, Louise. I've really loved the chat and thank you.
You're welcome.